We know this moment in our service by at least a few different names. Some people call it nap time. Others call it the part when the pretty music stops. Those of you joining us on JBS might call it time to flip the channel. It's almost 7 o'clock. Jeopardy's on. But I think that it's safe to say that in common parlance, most of us know this spot as the sermon. If you're still with me, you've been warned. You're in for a sermon, but just a little one, I promise. The Hebrew term for this little homily is Devar Torah. When I first learned this term back before I learned Hebrew, it was amusingly and perhaps a touch impiously translated to me as Torah thing. You know, it's just a Torah thing. No big deal. Would you like to do us a favor and give one on Friday night? Now, this lighthearted translation of Devar Torah is not entirely inaccurate. The Hebrew word Devar does indeed mean thing. So yes, a Devar Torah could be a Torah thing. But I think we can do better. Because in addition to meaning thing, the word Devar can also be translated as word. So I hope you'll agree with me that a translation that more accurately conveys the spirit of the activity that I am engaged in right now is a word of Torah. That said, this week's Torah portion, Devarim, has given me reason to rethink the potential font of wisdom that might flow from the cheekier translation, Torah thing. Devarim is the first parsha in Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah. And one can accurately say that this Torah portion begins the first Devar Torah, the first Torah thing, the first sermon in the history of the Jewish people. The word Devarim is the plural of the word Devar, that same Devar from the phrase Devar Torah. Ergo, the name of the parsha literally means words or things. This title comes from the parsha's opening line, Ele hadevarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel. I want to draw our attention here to a critical shift in the storytelling style of the Torah. The Torah's first 4 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, are all written in the third person, when God began to create the world. Then Moses held out his arm over the sea. Deuteronomy is different. Deuteronomy is composed in the first-person voice of Moses himself. Moses is addressing the children of Israel on the border of the Promised Land. And before they enter that Promised Land, he is reminding them who they are, where they came from, where they're going, and what they owe to each other and to God. In short, Moses is delivering a sermon. What makes a sermon a sermon? What makes a sermon different from other collections of words that we speak aloud? In his superb TED Talk entitled Atheism 2.0, philosopher Alain de Botton offers a surprisingly complimentary analysis of the concept of the sermon. He says that in our times, we've given up with the idea of sermons. If you said to a modern liberal individualist, hey, how about a sermon? They'd go, no. I don't need one of those. I'm an independent, individual person. What's the difference between a sermon and our modern secular mode of delivery, the lecture? A sermon wants to change your life, and a lecture wants to give you information. And then here's the kicker. Remember, this is from a TED Talk entitled Atheism 2.0. De Botton says, I think we need to get back to that sermon tradition. The tradition of sermonizing is hugely valuable because we are all in need of guidance, morality, and consolation. In short, sermons have a substance to them that the words of regular discourse lack. They have a gravity, a mass, a momentum. They are weightier than normal words. One might even call them real things. Because unlike ordinary Devarim, unlike ordinary words, sermons are meant to change minds, to change lives, to change the world. Sermons call on us to shake off the dust that has accumulated from our years of wandering through the wilderness. They tell us to get up and get moving. The promised land awaits, which is exactly what Moses is doing in Devarim. Cantor Liz Sachs, a former member of Central's clergy team, observes an interesting repetition in our Torah portion. The Parsha is largely Moses recapitulating the desert odyssey of the children of Israel. But Moses says that twice during their journey through the wilderness, God spoke to the people and declared, Rav lachem, for too long. Rav lachem shevet bahar hazeh, for too long have you stayed at this mountain. Rav lachem sov et hahar hazeh, for too long have you circled this hill country. Kumu ve'ivru lachem, get up and move yourselves. Cantor Sachs suggests that these words carry the primary message of Moses' sermon in Devarim. My words must lead to action. My words must lead to change. My Devarim must lead to Devarim. My words must lead to real, tangible change, things in this world. So what is the real, tangible thing I hope you take away from this little sermon, from this Devar Torah, from this Torah thing? I once heard my teacher, Rabbi Larry Hoffman, say, a good sermon doesn't tell you anything you didn't already know. A good sermon is a collection of words that helps you see things you already know in a different way that inspires you to do things differently. Each of us already knows something in our lives we want to do differently, something we want to change, a way we want to change ourselves, a way we want to change the world. This Shabbat, let's resolve to translate those Devarim into Devarim, to transform those words into things, to make our words of Torah into Torah things, to turn our Torah dreams into Torah truth. Shabbat Shalom.